Cool.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Diana. I'm here from Kale, and I am going to go ahead and introduce our amazing speaker here this afternoon. We're so grateful he's here with us. He served in the military. We're so grateful for your service here, Brian. So thank you for everything that you've done for us, for our country. We're so grateful for you. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to him in one moment. I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping tips. Just keep in mind when we're in here, this session is being recorded. So for if any reason you have to hop off the call or you want to play back the session at a later time, if there's something that you missed, you will have access to this recording up to 90 days once our conference closes. Also, if you have any questions for Brian, please post those in the chat as unfortunately, everyone is muted, so you won't be able to speak to Brian directly, but I will be monitoring the chat throughout the session, and I will go ahead and relate any questions that you have over to Brian. Also, at the end of this session, we just ask that you take a few moments to fill out our survey, as we really appreciate feedback for all of our speakers and also for our staff, so we know how to create our future conferences based off of your needs. So yeah, please take a moment to fill those out at the end of the session. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Brian Bills. The session is Service Member to Student, utilizing veteran strengths to overcome challenges. And we are so grateful you're here, Brian. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me. I want to thank the host, Diana White,
You're welcome.
and the note taker, which is Mary Celeste. So I appreciate you guys and welcome you and everybody to this presentation. This is going to be Service Member to Student, as Diana just said. We're going to go over some of the veteran strengths and some of the challenges and how we overcome those and help out veterans and really advocate for them in higher education. So one of the models that we use is Green Zone training. So we'll get into a little bit about what that is today. I just want to go over some of the decals that I have at the bottom of this slide here. So the non-traditional military student services, that's where I work. I am a graduate assistant. We service non-traditional students and military students at our office. We have about 600 military affiliated students at BG, and then we have about 400 or so non-traditional students. This BG seal is our seal for the office and for a student organization that's associated with our office, the Student Veterans. And then PAVE, which is a work-study program that we use here at BG. It's not exclusive to BG. There are a couple of different other schools that use that. And that's peer advisors for veteran education. So it's undergraduate student veterans that are in school, and they help mentor other student veterans. And it's sort of like a cohort model, and we see a lot of benefit to that. So let's get started. Talk a little bit about what Green Zone training is. So Green Zone training is the willingness to work with military students. We give a presentation to an organization, either on campus or off campus, that is willing and wanting to do the training. And then what comes out of that is this helpful little sticker, and it's can be placed on doorways, windows, and it's supposed to help students know, if they're a student veteran, when they enter somebody's office, that they have gone through this training, they are sensitive to the issues for student veterans or military affiliated. A few things that we'll discuss is the overview of military affiliated or military connected students. We kind of use that term interchangeably because of dependence, and we'll get into what that means, what life looks like in the military and after the military, the transition to civilian and student, and how best to assist military students in your role, in your organizations or your institutions, wherever you're participating from today. So again, my name is Brian Bills. I served in the military for 12 years, the Ohio Army National Guard. Dates of service, 2012 to 2024. So I just recently ETS'd, or my contract elapsed with the Army National Guard. And primarily my unit was the 1194th. We were construction engineers. It's just a fancy word for construction worker is what we did. Did a couple deployments. 2014, I was in Bagram, Mazar-e Sharif. So those are two bases in Afghanistan, the Northeast and the East Central area. The second deployment, it was to Camp Arifjan, Kuwait, and then we got sent to Kandahar. So Camp Arifjan is just a transition area. And then I was mobilized during COVID, did a few COVID missions with the state of Ohio. I carried samples and vaccines between nursing homes, hospitals, testing facilities. And I did that for the better part of a year. And then the United States border mission, I helped Border Patrol secure the border, if you will. We won't get into that too much. So what is Green Zone? Why do we call it Green Zone? So Green Zone was a safe haven in Baghdad, so Iraq. So unfortunately, an area that I never got to visit. I went to Afghanistan, but it's a well-known thing in the military community what the Green Zone is. Designated heightened security zone used to protect dignitaries and to provide refit to troops in Baghdad. So it's just supposed to be a relief area, a garrison. You're supposed to be, for lack of a better term or phrase, you're supposed to be safe there. So that's why they have named it Green Zone. So we're going to talk about some military connected student. This is our student chapter. And in this picture, what we have done is we partnered with another organization, the University of Toledo, which is about 20 minutes north of us in Ohio. We call it the Battle of I-75 because we're both along I-75. And these are students that have completed a 22-mile run to raise awareness for suicide, veteran suicide. So a lot of these students I know in this picture, a couple of them I don't because they're from UT. There is a congressional senator there, Haraz Gambari. And then I believe that is either the provost or the vice provost there that's handing the ball to one of the students. So these are the military connected students. Sometimes they wear uniforms, sometimes they don't. So we'll get into a little bit more about that. But this is we're going to have a couple quotes throughout these, and then there's going to be some takeaways or some hallmarks on why we're giving these quotes. So the reason that we're doing this training today is so we let veterans know if we haven't served ourselves, we understand and we are sensitive to your issues. So student veterans at one point in time signed a contract and were willing to go do something that was inherently dangerous. So we wanted to relay that through this slide, saying we understand that you were willing to do something and we're here to help you. So just taking that initial moment to say, hey, we understand is supremely helpful for student veterans. Military connected students could be any one of these three categories. They could be currently serving or active duty that transition to a veteran. They could be National Guard or reserves. They tend to be more traditional students because they go through basic training, AIT or A school, whatever it's called, their job training in the military. And then they come back to school and they do the drilling thing where they're doing 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer. They tend to have more of that traditional experience. Active duty, they're usually 18 to 24 and then come to school. So they do a couple years and then come back to school with their benefit. Or dependents. Dependents is a term that's used by the Department of Defense. That's why we use the term. Dependent is either a spouse or children of a service member that has earned an education benefit. And we treat them the same exact way that we would treat a veteran. Someone along the line has earned that benefit, so we treat them exactly the same. But that is what a dependent is. So those are military connected students. So this is a little bit more about active duty. In most instances, the active duty veteran has completed their determined contract. It's usually about anywhere from 3 to 4 years. Sometimes they do a little bit more. Sometimes there's fancy contracts where you can do less, 3, 4, but usually that's the time frame. And this is the more traditional category of a veteran. When you think of a veteran, it's usually somebody that has served on active duty. It's not always the case, but just to give you a better understanding of what I'm trying to talk about here. So living the military lifestyle full-time and returning to civilian life instantly without structured support. So that's, again, the traditional active duty veteran. National Guard and Reserves. there's a few branches that have National Guards. All of them have reserves. There's a few that have National Guards. So the Air Force and the Army have National Guards. They're similar to reserves. From what I understand, the big takeaway is there's different pots of money. There's different things that they can and can't do, different people that they answer to. The National Guards usually answer to the governor first, and then the President of the United States. That's not so much important to understand. It's just that they still are serving. They're just doing it in a different capacity. And one of the hallmark challenges for this is a balancing act between civilian and service members. So you signed a contract, you're doing something, but you're doing it on and off, and you're going from one environment to the next. You're going to structured to a little bit of unstructured, right? So it's that rigid military lifestyle, and then all of a sudden into classwork, right? So we wanted to highlight that. And then dependents, spouses, children, stepchildren, anybody that is related to the service member and is awarded the benefit. Sometimes the service member can do that. They can award the benefit to the dependent. And yeah, so the Department of Defense uses the term dependent. So that's why we use it for clarity, transparency, continuity. So everybody understands what we're talking about. So we don't use another fancy word, but we treat them just the same. Sometimes they have problems coming into the office because they don't, like the name of our office is non-traditional and military student services. So sometimes they don't see themselves as the service member or the veteran. So sometimes they have a hard time coming in seeking out our help. So we just want them to know that you are welcome here. We do treat you the exact same way. Dependents come with their own challenges. If they live with that traditional veteran, sometimes they've lived in different areas. They've had to go to different schools. They've had to pick up their lives just as much as the veteran has. So they have their own unique challenges. Alrighty, so this is the, as of September 2023, this is the active duty personnel, so 1.3 million. So it's a lot. And we put Columbus in there and we've highlighted that. This is going to be different. If you employ this training style or this model at your university or your institution, you're going to have different numbers. You're going to have different stats than us. We include this when we give it to our staff in our college. Like, for example, we just did one with the campus police department. We tried to make numbers make sense, right? So we give out the Columbus number because that's relevant to us. If you would do something like this, you should use your own numbers. But the other point is to highlight that there are a ton, 1.3 million people active duty. And then we have a nice breakdown of the popular areas for these branches of service throughout the United States. That is that there. So that, yeah, that's a breakdown of the 1.3 million. And then the different terms for some of the different branches. I can tell you from experience that soldiers and Marines, for example, do not like to be called the other name because you have gone through the training. You identify with that population. I am a soldier. I will always be a soldier. I don't like being called a Marine. It's not something I did. It's not a rude or mean thing, but Marines went through their own thing. They're Marines, right? Army. So you don't have to really know that, but sometimes people they don't really enjoy being counted by or called a different name. So that's just another thing. We don't expect people to always know the differences between those branches. And now that there's an additional branch, the Guardians, even I still screw that up. So it's still very much a learning process. And 16.2 million veterans in the United States. I think it's about 7% of the population. So less than 1% are currently serving. And then 7% of the United States have ever been a veteran. And then this is our breakdown here at BGSU. And again, if you do something like this, this would be for your school. So we do this to show what our most popular areas are. So the College of Technology is one of our biggest areas. We have 345 according to the spring data. We need to update this for the fall, but it's about the same. We stay at about 500 to 600 military affiliated students. So either the active duty veteran, anybody using a military benefit, dependents, we have a nice little breakdown of the numbers that we have. So just so you have an idea of when we're talking about military affiliated, we're talking about those two populations. So, and then the College of Arts and Sciences at 57, the Graduate College at 47. A lot of those are the MBA online program. We've had a lot of success with veterans joining our MBA online program. ROTC is kind of a weird gray area because of the service requirement and some of the contracting that they can do. While we love ROTC, they do have some of their own supports. So we will help any military student that comes in. And a lot of times when somebody commissions through ROTC, they do have a service obligation. So they are using some military benefits. We will help them. But they do have their own support systems, and they're doing their own thing. They're commissioning, they're trying to become officers. So they have some active duty people that facilitate and supplement them. So we try to be, I don't want to say hands off, but we try to let them do their thing. If they want help, we will help them, but they do have their own support system. So we try to leave them alone. But just so you understand that some of the time they're not yet a part of the military. So that's the hallmark here. The thing that we want you to take away from this is that, and they have to deal with that a lot of the times, is people like to point out that they're not a part of the military. They are in the process. They are doing something, and they're trying to accomplish something, a long-term goal, and I applaud them for doing so. But that's just why we include this slide here. Life in and after the military. So there's going to be two separate areas that we talk about. The military coordinator here, Jeff Roberts, was active duty. He was 82nd Airborne. I was Army National Guard. And while I did have some deployments, so I do understand parts of his life and how his day looked. My days were a little bit different because they were weekends, 2 weeks in the summer, and we'll go into some of those. But we're trying to tell you, we're trying to relay the structure of the two different environments. So even within our own, military affiliated populations, there were different structures that people were used to. You try to be sensitive to a National Guardsman may not have had the same experience that a veteran did, or may not have had the same job or the same branch. So there's so many subcategories within our own population. So takeaway with this quote is service members face immense challenges. And I feel like I've really harped on that a lot. They have their own unique challenges, just like non-traditional students have. And they do have an obligation, or they did have an obligation. They did sign a contract, and we try to be sensitive to that. And it doesn't stop them from performing what they need to do. But we try to be aware of the differences between those populations. Excuse me 1 second, I'm gonna take a drink of water. So with this slide, what we're trying to accomplish is, again, we're getting into the lifestyle, the structured environment that a student may have gone through to what they're going through now. It's not simply a career, it is a lifestyle. You get embedded into the lifestyle, from the way you talk, to the way you write emails, to the way you handle business. It really is, it's its own whole world. Like, depending on what base you're at, some bases you can't walk on grass. And I know that sounds silly. You're not allowed to walk on grass. You're not allowed to walk and talk on a cell phone while you're in uniform. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's seen as unprofessional, but there's all these little nuances. It is a lifestyle. It's a complete different way of operating. I'm sorry. It's crazy to think about, just reminiscing a little bit about not being able to walk on grass. Anyway, while self-resilience is praised for individual readiness, the needs of your branch unit team come first, always. So with the lifestyle, it doesn't really matter what you have going on at home. It does, but the first thing comes first, and that was your job. That is what you're doing. your soldiers, your Marines, they always came first. Doing your mission was always the most important. It was paramount. That's why we're doing what we're doing in the military. So we're trying to highlight that here with the military lifestyle, just to try to help civilians understand that these are the things that these service members have had to do. So for Jeff's day, this is his day, and just looking at this maybe kind of, I was happy that I never had to do this. There were a couple times on deployments when we had to do stuff like this, but allegedly he'd wake up every day at 5:30, and they would do some sort of physical training, force formation. They would read off an attendance roster. They would make sure everybody was there. If they weren't there, we had to figure out why they weren't, and it was always a process. I do remember that. But you go from physical training, then you do some kind of breakfast, and you report to the motor pool. That's where all your vehicles are at. The vehicles that you would train in, drive in, take to trainings and stuff like that. So he says this is a typical day in the 82nd Airborne. You would get breaks for lunch, for breakfast, but you always, first thing in the morning, you had to roll out of bed and you had to go run. You had to go run or do push-ups, and that was always a blast. The latest your instructor ever had to stay was 1 a.m. due to comrade losing a weapon. That's an important part or point that I wanted to highlight. When you lose something like that, pretty much everything on this base, a base is pretty much a small town, if you want to think of it that way. When you lose something like a weapon on a base, they shut down the base. This tiny town until this weapon is found. So this one instance that Jeff is highlighting here in this last bullet point, they stayed up till 1 a.m. trying to find this weapon that somebody had lost. It does happen. I don't want to say it happens frequently, but I've had to do things like this myself. So this is more of this is for his field training. So even though National Guard, we do the 2 weekends, or the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer. Usually that 2 weeks in the summer is this field training, but active duty, they do that more often throughout the year. They would do these, they would do their 2 weeks, right? But they were active duty. And they would wake up even earlier because there was movements. Movements is like you had to get into your vehicle, you had to transport people somewhere. And it was always early. So here he has a wake up at 3:30. You report to this building. They make sure everybody's there, and then they go conduct their field training. And then usually they would come back by 5. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's earlier. Usually it's later, but that's part of the job. Being in the field is practicing being at war. So it's basically its own little war game. Every single time you go out and do that, you simulate being in a war environment. What's going to happen? What should we do? How do we recover things? Some stuff like that. And then you live as you would in a remote area. So usually, if you were lucky, you got a tent. If you weren't lucky, you have at least had a sleeping bag, and you would be sleeping under the stars. So exiting the military comes with its own unique challenges. Usually there's some sort of, we call it TAPS. I know people love acronyms. The military loves acronyms. It becomes its own little language. There's usually what's called TAPS, the Transition Assistance Program, and they talk about things like retirement, spending time with your family, reintegrating within your own family, not just civilian life, but with your own family, getting a start on a different career. You may be leaving because you wanted better pay or going to college, and that's where we come in. We try to help people get into college and get their benefits lined up. So some of the voluntary reasons I went through, one of the reasons that I got out was my term of service had retired. I did want better pay, and I did want to go to college. So those are one of the reasons that I got out. But as you can see there's a whole list of reasons. And then non-voluntary reasons, you no longer meet medical requirements. So just like I talked about, you weren't allowed to walk on grass. You weren't allowed to be overweight. That's part of the contract. So that's that's something you got to deal with. You did sign a contract, and that's the hard thing about the military is you signed a contract. You have to be within these parameters that they had set out. So they go off of BMI, body mass index. You have to be within certain parameters. If you're driving while impaired, there's a zero tolerance for drug use. There's usually a drug test every month. Zero tolerance for any drug use, anything. If there's any sort of level within your body, they will find it. And yeah, I've seen a lot of people get out because of that. Physical training needs. So if you weren't able to run your 2 miles fast enough, you weren't able to do 50 push-ups in 2 minutes, that could be reasons for separating from the military. And we point out that there's several reasons that you could exit the military. This is not an exhaustive list. These are just some of the most common reasons. People who involuntarily separate have experienced a hardship in many cases because a lot of people still want to serve. I would still like to serve. I just needed a break. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to hopefully make some better pay. So that's just my unique situation. And I'm sure Jeff, the military coordinator here, he had a different situation. And all 600 students that we help, they had a different reason for leaving. Some of them may be similar, but we try to be sensitive to those topics. Well, now what? You lose a piece of your identity when you transition out of the military. Fortunately, I had the military office when I was transitioning, so it's been a very easy transition. I have seen buddies and some students here that they just have a difficult time making that transition. You go from that structured environment to school, which is somewhat unstructured. Nobody's telling me where I have to be, what I have to do. In the military, they tell you where to be, when to get up, what clothes to wear, right? When you're going to eat, and then when you can go to bed. And but out of that, you have a team, you have shared hardships, close bonds, trauma bonding, whatever you would like to call it, daily interactions. You no longer get those. You can, but you get them in a different sort of capacity. You miss out on the challenges, the adoration, membership, really that sense of belonging. You're now a veteran, but you really don't have that connection anymore that you used to have. Many service members don't think this way. There are many who join because being in conflicts is what they want to do for their own valid reasons. Some people wanted that challenge, and some people still want to, and for some of them, they just can't anymore. So again, the main theme here is we understand these challenges and we try to overcome that with understanding. And that most of the time in my experience has been huge for our population. So the transition to college, this is always a fun one. We love getting the service members that are transitioning because they're starting a new life, and we get to be a part of that. Colin Powell, who's a phenomenal leader. He has some absolutely amazing books, absolutely amazing quotes. This is one of my favorites. There are no secrets to success. It is a result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. And that's a lot of what the military teaches you. Sometimes you're going to fail. It happens, but we got to move on. Same with transitioning to college. There are going to be some failures. We're going to learn some lessons, but inevitably we are going to move on. So we can do what's called the simultaneous transition. There's that loss of purpose I discussed about a couple slides back. You no longer have that conflict, that drive, that structure, those shared connections, but you do end up having a sense of freedom that you no longer had before. I can walk and talk on a cell phone now. I'm allowed to walk on grass if I want to. I know that sounds silly, but those are some of the issues that have been ingrained and indoctrinated into service members. Watching students struggle with student life. The similarity is the bureaucracy. There's a bureaucracy within the military, but it's just a different process. You have to relearn. There's a new learning curve, and academics is always a struggle. Showing people how college works is different than you would be graded in the military. So relearning that process, and a lot of it's just relearning. It's not unmanageable. It's not undoable. We just have to help out a little bit extra because we're managing expectations. And a lot of the times service members feel like they can't handle it, but they definitely can. So we just try to help them with their processes. And just like non-traditional students, military students are going to have parental duties. They're going to have other duties. Sometimes they already have homes. They already have pets. They already have, spouses, children. They have other outside duties, the same duties that they may have had in the service, but now they're in a different environment. So we're going to talk about the VA, the Department of Veteran Affairs. They offer many benefits to veterans. I think I have used up to 4 different benefits. There's tons and tons. I wouldn't say tons, but there's a handful of different benefits. And that's why this talking to the VA, it's more than just healthcare. It is education benefits. They do pay for schooling, and they do pay for books in certain situations. They can pay for laptops. So that's why it's important to discuss the VA, because there are different options, and we have to be able to help our students, the service members or the dependents that are coming through. We have to be able to know about different stuff that they do besides just healthcare or burial assistance, which is some other services that the VA offers. They offer no-cost healthcare for veterans who have served over 24 continuous months on active duty, were discharged for medical reasons, or given out. There's no shortage of nightmare stories from veterans in dealing with the healthcare. I will combat this bullet point. I have had a decent experience. I have heard some of these horror stories. I had a decent experience. So I challenge this idea a little bit. I do think, just like all processes, there's a learning curve. I do believe things are getting better, but we try to be reasonable when telling student veterans, service members, dependents, when they come through. There's going to be a bit of a lag. It's paperwork. It is a government entity. There is a little bit of a lag, and unfortunately, sometimes people have to wait a long time, and sometimes people, they need that money, especially when they're paying their tuition bills. So we try to be reasonable. I try not to perpetuate the negativity, but we wanted to highlight that here, that there is a bit of a learning curve, even with using the VA. This is a mercifully limited overview of some of the different benefits, because there are a couple. If a student mentions that they're having issues, you don't have to refer them to Jeff Roberts at the non-traditional and military student services here. Most universities already have some sort of school certifying official. They may already have a veteran services office. You should refer them to those areas, because they're going to be knowledgeable about those benefits, the documents that they have to fill out, what to look out for. And the important thing to know is not all VA benefits pay for tuition in full. So sometimes there's this misconception that just because you served, you have 100% of your tuition paid for. In most cases, that is true, but there's some instances where it's not. So that's why we always refer people to the military office if you have questions about your military benefits. Most universities do have that. There are several rules that veterans and dependents have to follow. There's an application process, and like I said earlier, there is a little bit of a lag, because it does take documentation, it does take review, so it does take just a second. Veteran service offices. So in Ohio, I don't know what it's like in other states. In Ohio, every county has one, so we just wanted to highlight that. They do help with a little bit of schooling stuff. Mostly it's disability claims and housing situations. So we wanted to highlight that most counties, or excuse me, all counties in Ohio have a veteran service offices that could be different between states. This is Wood Counties again. That's where our school is located. And Toledo, just helpful resources. So that's why we included these things. They're going to change between even Toledo as a university. Some of their resources are going to be different than ours, and they're going to be different than yours. But we try to include those. That way we're helping people when we're giving them this training, we can relate that to those service members, because sometimes they have that initial interaction with the student veterans and we don't. So that's why we relay this information, this Veteran Center. There's the crisis hotline. So it is manned 24 hours a day. It's a very helpful resource, very, very helpful, unfortunately. But we wanted to highlight that. How you can help. This is the most important thing. A huge thing is this stigma around student veterans, and that, you know, there's PTSD, there's a TBI, there's always some sort of issue. It's not always the case. And a lot of student veterans will tell you that they're just people. They signed a contract at one point, they had to go do a job, but they're just people. So the biggest thing we can do, I mentioned it earlier, is refer. Get them to somebody that knows what they're talking about, either a veteran service office, school certifying official. Most schools have a veteran service office. Get them in front of people that know what they're talking about, because they need help. There's just too much stuff for them to know, and that's why there's these subject matter experts. So we always tell people, please refer. Your unique placement and the model. So this is the model that we were talking about. One of the approaches. This training is one of the approaches. The other approach is a holistic approach. We try to take in the totality of circumstances. Each student is going to be different. There's going to be different branches, different benefit that they're using, different program that they're wanting to pursue. Each case is going to be different. So that's why we try to take a holistic approach, because sometimes we can stretch benefits. Sometimes we can help avoid bills if we do something else. So we try to take that into account. We talked a lot about the challenges, but there's a lot of strengths. So the veterans are used to being student veterans are used to being in an a structured environment, but sometimes the goals are unclear. They're used to adapting and having to overcome adversity. So there's a lot of strengths. A lot of the determination is insane with veterans. They can handle school. They want to handle school. Their school, in most cases, is paid for. They can do it. There's a lot of strengths. We just don't know how to capitalize on those. And one of the biggest challenges is the misunderstanding. So that's what this training is hoping to serve, is just better understanding these challenges, where these people come from, and how best to help them. One of the points I want to highlight is, don't be afraid to ask questions. We are people first and foremost. We were asked to do a job. At one point, we signed up to do a job, or with the National Guard and Reserves, they're still currently doing that job. They want to talk about their experience. They don't necessarily maybe want to talk with strangers about PTSD or TBIs, and that's where we get into some tricky situations. So just understanding that a lot of the times veterans do want to talk about their experience. They do want to talk, as long as they know that they're in a good place to share. So they struggle to find their place in leaving such a structured environment. We try to be that environment, but try to help them transition to what the new environment's going to be, which is a university setting. So here are a few of the models. This training was developed before I even got here, so I can't point in a certain direction where it specifically came from, but these are a few of the models that talk about this green zone training, and it is closely modeled after the allied training, the safe space trainings for the LGBTQ plus community. So that's what we have done. We have adopted this training and made it geared specific towards our population. That's why we had those stickers that people can hang up, so that those student veterans, the service member, the dependents know that this is a safe area for them to be, and that they will be respected, treated well, and that those people that are helping them are sensitive to their challenges. I believe that is it. There's my information if you guys would like it. There's some resources that we have at our Veteran Service Office, or we call it the Non-Traditional Military Student Services. Most schools have something like that called something else, usually Veteran Services, but that's why you refer. And I think that concludes my presentation. Do I have any questions, Diana? Do I have
I
time?
don't
I
have any
apologize.
questions, but well, thank you so much, Brian, for that information. That was very, very enlightening. I learned a lot about the military I didn't know before. So thank you so much. We have about 10 minutes left. So if anybody does have any questions, please post those in the chat and Brian can answer those. I can get those over to him. I mean, as far as a few comments that we had in there, Brian, it looks like you do have quite an audience of veterans as well. So we have Jonathan Bateman, who said, thank you, Brian, for your service. He was in the military, in the Army for 2, and I don't know military verbiage that well, so you might have to help me here, Brian. But
Sure.
Army and then 2/5 CAV.
Yeah, so that's just a unit name.
Okay.
I don't know where specifically that would be unless they told
Okay.
me.
It says 136 infantry.
Yeah, those are just unit names. Somebody that would be in that unit would know exactly what they're talking about.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jonathan, for your service and Brian for your service. So yeah, he's in the chat. We also have Tanya Whitfield, who also want to thank you for your service. She is a Navy veteran of 8 years and a husband, retired Navy vet for 26 years.
Wow.
She said, thank you for sharing your background of what veterans experience. Veterans, no matter the branch, it is important to understand. Yeah, and thank you for explaining the different branches and how to be respectful when you do speak to someone about being in the military, because there are so many different branches and different jobs. So like for me, because I haven't been in the military, I haven't been aware of that. So you explaining that to me, now I understand when I talk to someone who's in the military to,
Well,
not.
hopefully it made sense.
It did totally, yeah.
What I was getting at.
No, it definitely did. Like that resonated with me. That was like my takeaway is like, okay, that just being respectful when you're speaking to someone who did serve in the military or is serving, to understand their branch and speak to them from what branch that they've served. So thank you for that information. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it looks like we don't have any other questions.
All right. Well, I
But-
hope everybody enjoyed. If you do have any questions, there's my email, my phone numbers, or if I misrepresented something, and you want to yell at me, feel free to call. Feel free to call at me.
Hopefully no yelling.
I think they're gonna do some kind of survey at the end.
Yes. Yep.
I
Thank you for
welcome
finding me,
and
Brian.
appreciate all constructive criticisms.
Yes.
I will not get better if I don't get feedback. So please, please give me some feedback.
Well, I think you did a fabulous job today.
My first presentation, so don't take it easy
amazing.
on me. I will be all right. I promise.
No, well, you did a great job. It's very clear, concise, great information. And yes, as Brian said, there is a survey on the hub to the right where the chat is. So if you just click on that, take a few minutes to fill out the survey right now while you're in front of your computer at the end of this session. And we have a few minutes left in the session too. So please take a few moments to fill that out. Please let Brian know how he did. If you enjoyed this information. Also, us here at Kale, we really use these surveys to for ourselves when we're curating our future conferences. So please take the moment to just fill that out and let us know what you liked about it. If there's any additional information we can add into this in a future conference, and we want to give you what you're looking for. So please fill those out. And Brian, thank you so much for being here. That was amazing. It was so nice meeting you. We're so grateful that you took the time out of your day to be here to provide
Thanks for
us
letting me be a
information.
part. This was awesome.
Yes. Oh my gosh, of course. We loved having you. And thank you to all the participants who took the time to jump in here today. Yeah, and to be here. We also had Amy, who just posted a comment as well. Brian said, thank you for your presentation. I am a counselor in Hawaii and support a lot of veterans, and specific tips on leveraging the experience, familiarity with a structured environment and applying that to the college environment. Oh, I'm sorry, any specific tips you have on leveraging the experience or familiarity with a structured environment and applying that to the college environment?
When I get when new veterans come in or they're transitioning, I tell a lot of them, depending on what benefit they use, they do get their housing paid for. They do get their tuition paid for. So what helped me and what I try to relay, I give an option to new service members, veteran students. Uh, I tell them basically treat it like a job. Treat it like you treated the military. Now you don't have to get up like we talked at, 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, and go run and do whatever you want to. But treat it like a job. Treat it like, an 8 to 5, because you are getting more or less, you're getting paid to go to school, right? They're paying for your housing. That helped me. My grades took off when I started looking at it as a job, right? You had to report to duty in the military, report to school.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm gonna write that down. That was cool.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah. Yeah. What are my benefits going into this job? Oh, all right. Hope that answered your question for you. Yeah, she said thank you. Thank you for answering that.
That's just one example. I mean, I'm so close to this topic. I feel bad because maybe I'm not explaining it that well. But that's just one of the examples that I've actually today I just used with a service member. So I hope that's helpful. There's probably better answers, but that's just an example.
That was a great answer. Yeah, I think you answered it perfectly. Yeah, and if anyone has any other questions that they didn't get a chance to get to on here, if you go into the Kale Conference Hub, there is a section of contacts, and any of the presenters, attendees that are registered for this event, you can communicate with them right there on our hub. So Brian's email's on there as well. So all right. Well, then I guess that is the conclusion of the session. Again, thank you, Brian, so much for being here. We
Thank you.
appreciate you. And
Thank you
I
very
hope
much.
everyone enjoys the rest of your day. Enjoy it if you're going into any other sessions today. And we have a full day tomorrow as well, and half day Friday. So thank you all for being here. And I'll go ahead and close us out. All right. Have a good one, Brian.
Thank you.
You're welcome.